Hello, movie lovers. I'm welcome to the show. For today's podcast episode and YouTube episode, we're actually going to be doing a little bit of a treat for everybody. I actually have Tilman Borck with me again today, and we're actually going to be doing a little bit of. We're actually going to do some topics for tonight. Matter of fact, I actually had the privilege to actually interview him. What, about a month ago?
Yeah, I think it was like a month ago.
Right. And, he actually has a little independent film out. I'm not sure if it's going to be hitting the Amazon or anything like that, because I remember at one time it was banned, the poster was banned and censored
Yeah.
because of what it looked like. But, like I said, I understood what you were going for. I understood the whole entire themes of what you were going for. And, he's actually the independent director for the movie The Midas Touch. Not the commercial, but the movie Midas Touch. And like I said, I like the originality behind the Midas Touch. If you do not know what the Midas Touch is or anything like that, I'm actually going to have a link after the show to where you guys can actually view the trailer. But further ado, let's go ahead and get on with it. So when we last talked, like I said before, there was about censorship, about the fact that they censored your poster, Amazon did, and then they said, well, we can't market this because of the way that the poster actually looks like. So I noticed that you changed the poster just recently. Is that
Mhm.
to actually help it market it to Amazon, or has Amazon just turned their backs completely away from you after that?
Well, they wouldn't have the first poster, so there is no way of being on Amazon unless we change the poster. So we had to
Right.
do that. But we're still sticking with our poster, the original one, for every other purpose other than Amazon. And we have a little something on our Instagram about that, how that came to pass. It's a little bit of an interesting poster. The first one was. You can read different things into it. And I was surprised that Amazon would still make a big deal out of it because it's not a photo. Anything you show on a photo that might be too graphic, I understand, but it's just like a work of art. And even on other social media like Facebook, you can depict anything you like in a work of art, unless it's a picture or a movie. It's not edited. So we were surprised, but we ended up, I think, with the nice alternative. And I had the same guy, same artist, named David Chinchell, made another poster, and we're happy with that. And Amazon seems to be happy too, because our um, distributor, our international American distributor, Indie Rights Movies, has sent it to Amazon, and they seem to be fine with it. No objections so far, so we're happy.
That's great. I'm happy that you were able to get everything up and running and everything. I was wondering about that myself. As soon as I saw the poster, I'm like, wait, this is not the same poster that I saw a month
Mm,
ago. So there
yeah,
has to be some type of marketing behind this to actually get the ball moving on your movie, because I actually do want to check this out on Amazon. As a matter of fact, I actually got the privilege to interview two other independent film directors that are like, they're young in their teens. They just came up with their independent film, and I got a chance to actually watch that on YouTube, but it's also on Amazon as well. So I cannot wait to actually watch your film, to be able to give it a proper review, to actually watch your film. But like,
that,
let's go on
that,
ahead and talk about censorship for a minute here. Okay, so we talked about censorship last time, and we went into a little bit of
mhm.
detail with it. But here's the thing: it's okay for a woman to show her breast on Twitter and have fans only, but it's not okay to have a poster plastered on what you have on that poster, which is something that I don't get.
Yeah, it seems have to do a lot with different pressure groups. If you have a group, you make a group and you say, okay, we're a group of women and we're feminists, and we see actually that breasts should not be sexualized, and we want them to be seen just like men. It's unfair that men can show their breasts, and if you have a lot of people behind that, and then it's I think that campaign was actually kind of smart because they're twisting it around. They're saying these are just boobs. Are you seeing anything sexual in it? You shouldn't. So they had this campaign, and now everybody seems to be fine with that. Not on all social media, and I think when you're interested to go against censorship, what you have to do is you just have to form a group and then go about that. And in my case, I'm happy that we can still use the original poster, and that this is just for Amazon reasons. So I don't feel like I'm artistically cut. I'm not. It's not like somebody is not allowing me to show that original poster. It's just on one specific side, and everybody who wants to see it on Instagram, everybody who wants to see it on our side can still see it. So I'm okay with that. So begrudgingly, I said, okay, let's have another poster, which is, of course, also a matter of cost and work. But no, that's the way it is, and I'm okay with it.
Right. And here's the thing. I like this new poster. It actually shows the characters. It actually gives you the premise of what the film's about. It shows the bar scene where the guy is actually going to pick up the girl and everything, because the guy is a zero, is basically what you said in the interview too, is like the guy's a zero. He has zero confidence in himself. Then all of a sudden he just becomes a guru.
Trailer, not the poster.
Right. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about the poster on the details that it actually gives.
Okay.
Yeah, the new poster. Because in the new poster, it actually says, this is what is pointing out to me. You actually have the characters in this bar scene. You have this other guy that's the zero. This is the main character who has zero confidence in himself.
You confused me there. I thought, why is he saying that the poster depicts the bar scene? It's the guy from the bar scene in the book. Sorry, I didn't get you there.
It's okay. It's perfectly fine. I understand. But yeah, that's what I picked up from this new poster and everything. So, and I understand why you went with that one. It's actually mostly like a family-friendly type of poster compared to the other one, But, censorship is something that I just don't understand and everything, because it's art. And not only that, but, there's actually times when guys are actually pictured from the bottom down too. It's not as big in the movies or anything like that, but I've seen where men genitals are actually presented. Game of Thrones, for example. You also have
the movie, actually.
Right. And then Forgetting Sarah Marshall was another thing, 5 to 10 minute scene where Peter's dick is actually all over the place for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Very good example, because I think it's easier with it's interesting, if you compare a man's body and a woman's body, it's easier to show the fun bit of it and the comedy of it, because she's in that scene. I like that scene. Is great that you picked that as an example. She wants to basically dump him, say it's over and leave him, and he's prepared, like a sexy moment, the bed is there, and he's all naked. And it's so completely out of touch, because he didn't think that she was going to leave him. And so it's not sexual at all. We're watching him. He is naked. And you see his dick there, but all we think is, oh, God damn it, he didn't understand. He thought they were still in a relationship. It's going to last. And so it's nice in a way that it depicts nudity, but it's not sexual. It's funny, and so that's possible, right? Right.
And that's another thing, though, too. Women are like, well, we always get our breasts exposed, we always get our vagina exposed, but there's nothing there for us. And then finally, we actually have it now to where men are actually being exposed the same way that women are, but not as big as it is. You know what I'm saying? It's not as out there as it should be. It should be fair on both ends. It shouldn't just be fair on one end or the other. But like I said before, it's the way that European models actually show is this: nakedness is actually art in itself and everything. And with us as Americans and everything, we always go with the lustfulness of our eyes and stuff like that, and we mispresent the actual art in itself and everything. We just see the beauty of the woman and then the lustfulness of the woman, rather than just the artwork and everything that's actually presented to us. And that's the difference between people that live out in Europe and the Americans, because we just go ahead and our imaginations are just running wild. We'll just put it that way.
And we've had this for a long time. I remember there was this movie in the 70s, many movies in the 70s. I don't know if you've seen 1900 by Bernardo Bertolucci, which is a huge movie. It's about 3.5 hours. And there's a scene with Gerard Depardieu and Robert De Niro, and they're both naked. You can see, and nobody made a big deal out of it. think that most Americans know that Robert De Niro ever showed his penis on camera, and so it was because it's so unimportant, and nobody makes a scandal out of that. And even in the '70s, it was not a big deal, and people were so much more into the content of the movie and what it portrayed. And as you said, nudity was seen as art, and it had been works of art for a couple of hundred of years. And so it always depends on how you like to scandalize it. Obviously now it's a different situation because the media is more and more interested in getting some dirt together of actors and directors and making a scandal out of it because they sell papers that way.
Publicity.
I hope that will change eventually in America too, and it'll be a bit more relaxed. I would like to see that.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get at, though, too. Anything for publicity and everything, negative publicity at that, to give somebody a negative image, and that's not even right. It's not even called for. And, like I said before, it's just art. It's just beautiful artwork and stuff like that. Now, let's go on ahead and talk about the differences between American-made films and overseas films like you're doing. What's the difference between the two? I mean, is it just like the way we do things, or is it set up differently with the budgeting for a movie over there and stuff like that? Because I know it's totally different because of the coin that you guys actually use too.
Of the what we use?
The difference in pounds and stuff like that, the money usage.
Oh, okay. You're referring to. I think the bigger difference is not between American and European movie making, but between production, big corporate production, film companies, movie making, and independent movie making. I think that's a big difference. I think if you are on a very small budget like we were, we shot this for basically around $350,000, then you have to be. You have to improvise. You have to, plan on the other hand also before that. But I think it's not the independent movie making. I think it's not so much different in the States. And when it comes to the big movies, the really huge movies, we don't even make them in Europe. There are hardly movies of a budget of 200 to 300 million euros or dollars for that matter. These movies, I think, for a long time will be made only in co-production, at least with the big American studios. But I think the situation for independent filmmakers pretty much the same. You need to plan well. You need to see, how can I get this done? How can I shoot this fast? Because basically what a low budget means is not a lot of shooting days. So we shot 25 days, and we shot about, if you consider the whole length of the movie, that's close to 4 minutes a day. So that's almost like a soap opera. In a soap opera, they shoot like 7 minutes a day of footage that they actually end up using. In a movie, they'd like to have, with a big budget, they shoot a minute and a half a day. And so you don't have a lot of chances to make mistakes, and you can't afford to shoot too many times with 22, 23 takes. It's better be 3 or 4 takes, and then you gotta move it. And the funny thing was, when I'd written the screenplay, I went to cast my director of photography, and I went to talk to different people. I said, this is not gonna be so difficult. I wrote a reasonably cheap movie. There are no explosions and there's no this and that, which is so expensive. But then they said, well, look at that. Look at the characters you have. Look at the different sets you're going to have. It's not going to be that cheap. It's not going to be easy to shoot on that kind of budget.
The locations, too, alone. The locations alone will actually cost you a pretty penny as well, too.
That's it. It's very, very expensive to shoot them on a location. And so we just had a couple of locations. A lot of it we shot in a studio. We got the chance of renting a huge, actually it was a car dealer's empty a lot. And so we got that, and we were able to get that for a month, and we had production offices and a lot of scenes built up this. We had it was nice. We had scenes that were depicted in the Middle East, and it was all just studio scenes, but it worked out nice. It's also good if you want to shoot something that's more along the lines of a fairy tale, because you can use that artificial artificial circumstances, and make it look according to a fairy tale. Whereas when you want to have a very realistic look and shoot a very realistic movie, if you want to do this not on the streets but on the set, then that's kind of hard to achieve, because you got to be very good in set building and setting that up. So in a way, I think it came in handy for us that it was supposedly a kind of fairy tale, a movie.
Right. Right, because you have to do something that's very simplistic. You actually have to make it to where it fits in with your budget and stuff like that too. And that's why we actually have maybe a lot of independent films where it's just set in like one room versus going into several other locations, because it's actually easier to shoot that way. Because like I said, locations and everything take a while to actually, it takes a big chunk of your money by shooting in location. That's another big thing. That's what happened with the original director for It. The guy wanted to shoot in New York, and Warner Brothers shot him down. They said, no, it's going to cost you this X amount of money to shoot in New York. So they parted ways over differences of opinion. Then we got Anthony Muschietti involved, and he decided, they said, look, I can shoot this movie somewhere else cheaper than what the other director wanted. So, of course, they went with Andy Muschietti. So that's what happened with It. So that's actually the same thing that goes on hand in hand as independent directors too, where it's like, okay, I can't shoot at this location, so I have to do what benefits me and what helps roll the camera, what helps me to revive for myself as someone that's actually developing art, to where I can actually do this for my budget. And that's the hardest thing, though, because pretty soon you actually run out of money, and then before you know it, you actually have to do some GoFundMes. You have to go ahead and do what Kevin Smith did, sell his whole entire comic book collection, just so it can actually make ends meet. And it's a hard thing. Everybody thinks it's an easy job to do, but it's so much harder and everything as an independent artist and stuff like that too, because you're trying to make yourself known, but at the same time, you're also having to be in the fight with all these other studios to try and get yourself known. You're pretty much at the bottom where nobody will notice you. So therefore, you have to keep climbing that wall and everything too. But you're actually making art at the same time. And that's the beauty of what you're trying to create and everything. And that's something that I actually understand from both sides. I understand from a studio side of things for their perspective, but I also understand from an independent film fan as well. And I love independent films versus big budget films. For instance, Batman versus Superman cost $250 million to make. In order for you to make that budget back, it would have to gross that much money in 3 weeks. And that movie didn't gross that much money in 3 weeks because of the split between the audience score and also to the critic score as well. And therefore, it did not make its money back the way it needed to make its money back. And then you take a third away from that because it goes into the movie theaters. And then, of course, after that, it goes into the box office. And before you know, you actually have to pay the PR people, everybody else that was in there. So before you know it, it didn't make as much as you actually think it made because of the fact that it got eaten up.
Yeah. That's difficult. And if you have a big budget movie like that, then there's just only one way to go. You got to have a superhero movie. Or the other thing that you can do, you can make a very well-known animated character. Maybe that's the only way. 2 ways you can do it. Because if you look at the list of the 100 movies that brought most money, then that's all there is. There are superhero movies and some animation movies, and so that's a bit. And we got that now. What the development is that many people have pointed this out lately is that you got those super high budget movies, and then you got the really low budget movies. But for a while, there were no reasonably budgeted movies, like between $25 and $75 million, let's say. But I think it's getting better now because we get now new producers like Jason Blum who go to genre movies, they have horror movies, and they say, "Oh, we don't need the stars, but we have a reasonable budget. We want to pay everyone their usual Hollywood's
Right.
scale of the people who work for the production, and we can do this with $20 to $30 million, and we are very much character based. We need good actors, but not famous actors, and we just have interesting movies, like interesting stories, like the Purge or movies like that.
Mhm.
And I think so that's what we see a bit the character and content-driven movies coming back, which is so weird that we even have to talk about content-driven movies. Everything in a movie should be content, but that's not
Right.
always it. But I think we're
Mhm.
on the verge that after all of that, television, has come up with interesting ideas. I think movies are picking up, and if it hadn't been for Corona, we might have seen a bright future, but now we don't know about that anymore.
No. Well, speaking of Corona, though, I have to say there is some positives with the Corona thing, though.
Sure.
Because of the Corona, we're actually getting more independent films than we ever did before,
Yeah.
and
Because
everything. And we have people that still go, "Oh, well, where's all the original movies coming from? Where are they?" And finally, they're actually the doors are being busted wide open because people are hungry for content now. So therefore, the studios are actually trying anything they can to actually satisfy that need and want. So now we're actually getting independent
binge
movies.
watching. Right?
What was that?
Everybody's at home binge watching, so they need a
Yeah,
lot of new content, right? Let's hope
right.
we can
And
keep
that's
on
actually
with that on that with our movie too.
right. Well, another thing too is though, that's like Frenchie said on his channel is like, because of this virus, we're so hungry for content and new things. We never would have thought that certain movies would actually come to Netflix or anything like that because it was probably be made for something that was made in theaters. For instance, we have the Old Guard that came out on Netflix. That was actually made for a big movie theater. Then we have the Five Bloods that came out as well. And if you look at the casting for the Five Bloods, you actually have Chadwick Boseman in that movie, who's a big name star before he passed
Yeah,
away.
right.
And if you actually think about it, that movie would have actually sold tickets and everything if it wasn't for the coronavirus. So
Mm-hmm.
it actually has its positives and negatives, like everything else. But it
Yeah.
also gives us some breathing room, for some creativity on things that we probably wouldn't have even checked out because those smaller films seem so little because of the fact that you have those big, huge budget films that we always go to, those blockbusters that we
Mhm.
gravitate towards. And that's why we would actually go see them rather than the smaller films. But now, because there is no big blockbuster films that much, we can actually celebrate smaller films. So that's
Yeah.
actually a little bit of a positive. But now we have
That
this whole entire thing with HBO Max and Warner Brothers, this war going on between them two.
Well, the big companies were just waiting for a chance to cut out those rules that you have to have a movie a theatrical release for some time and then release it after what was it? First it was 6 months and now it's 6 weeks. And now, of course, they're happy and they say, "Oh, well, this is Corona. We can't do that. The only thing we can do is have a theatrical release simultaneously with an online release." And so they're just, happy about that chance. And it'll never go back. It'll never be movies be released exclusively for a certain amount of time theatrically. And that's a bit of a shame because people
Yes.
are comfortable at home. And maybe we'll see the dying of movie theaters, or at least closing of a lot of movie cinemas. I'm afraid that's going to happen next year. I think.
I do too. I'm hate to say it, but before this virus even happened, AMC was also $1 billion in the hole before the virus even happened.
Mhm.
And so I wouldn't be surprised. And even if they get a backer that happens that happens next year, which I highly doubt, they could probably, don't get me wrong, you can actually probably get other movie studios to go ahead and help them out. Maybe a movie studio might want to buy out a movie theater because they can actually buy movie theaters now.
They
But
can do that.
still,
They did that in 50 years, but now they can do it again, right?
right. So my thing is though, it's also going to be a risk factor because if I'm an investor, if I'm going to invest into a movie theater, let's say, I know Disney has over $1 billion, but as someone that's actually invested their time and energy into something, it's like, do I want to go on ahead and invest in something that I'm not sure that's going to be available in the future? Because we have the
Hmm.
streaming services now that are offering movies, big budget films now that we're going to release in theaters. So,
Right.
is it worth the hit or is it not worth the hit? That's actually the difference. But the way that Warner Brothers is actually doing it is kind of smart though, because with Wonder Woman 1984, you're releasing it to the overseas movie theaters, and you're also releasing it onto the streaming for a short period of time, and then it goes away. So
Hmm.
you're making money, but you're also missing out on the US box office, but you're still making money somewhere or another. But I can actually respect them for the fact that, hey, look, let's try it on both ends. For people who want to go out and see the movies, let's go on ahead and put it into the movie theaters and put it on the streaming service. Let's make it comfortable for both people, so that way they can go out and see the movie the way they want to actually see it. So it could
Hmm.
actually work on both ends if they actually choose to do something like that. Not just for the overseas, but for the United States box office too. Because we also have California, who actually, in New York, those movie theaters are actually shut down, and those are the big chunk that actually comes into the box office.
All right.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you got some good points there, and I think I agree. But yeah, the amount of people that are really dying to see a movie with a big audience and on a huge screen is limited in a way. Then again, the superhero movies are helping us because then people think, "Oh, I really want to see this with surround sound. I really want to see the big explosions or other action movies. I want to hear that. I want to be immersed in that um, experience." So maybe that'll help a little bit. But probably not many people will find a reason why they should see a little independent drama movie on anything else but on their home
Right.
video, whatever device they have. Right? Is there
Let's see,
somebody?
Larry. Yeah,
I see
Larry
something
Lee.
popping.
Yeah, Larry Leese. He go from Cinnamon Gold from his podcast. He
Oh,
said,
great!
"I'm ready." Yeah, I'm
Larry.
ready for Wonder Woman 84. I am too, man. I'm excited. I want to see it, so I'm excited about that.
Right.
Hold on one
What is that
second.
even? WW84?
Repeat that.
What was that he's dying to see? I don't even. I saw that it said on the WW84. What was the
Yeah,
movie?
Wonder Woman 84.
Ah, Wonder, sure, sure, yeah. I didn't read
Yeah,
that much. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I love the other Wonder Woman movie, and as much as I don't like superhero movies so much, I like that it was a bit of an intelligent plot. They had all this Greek and Latin myth going with it, and that was a smart movie for what it was. And so I'm going to check that out too. When is it going to be released? Somewhere in March, May, April, something.
it's, to be honest with you, Wonder Woman 84 is actually going to be released on the 25th on HBO Max, and it's going to be in the
No.
overseas area on the 25th as well.
Of what
So
month?
yeah, so I'm excited for it. I like Greek mythology. I've always liked Greek mythology and stuff like that. But yeah,
Hmm.
that's what Larry said. He has his own little podcast channel called Cinema Gold. Go ahead and check that out, guys. Whenever you guys have a chance, it's a great podcast. But
Is
yeah,
that about movies as well?
yeah, he talks about movies. He does movie reviews and stuff like that. His stuff
Okay.
is really good. So I recommend his channel and also Schmoes of the North.
Call me,
So
Larry. Have me on your podcast.
I definitely will try and get you on there.
If you're
um,
gonna do some more marketing for my movie.
exactly. Hey, you can always use more.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as too much. But let's go on ahead and talk about some of the other stuff. I know that you wanted to jump into some other topics too. We
Hmm.
talked about the censorship. We talked about the difference between American and European box office and stuff like that. But another thing too that I was actually wondering about is the fact that whenever you're telling a story, whenever something's overseas, like let's say for example, the girl with the dragon tattoo, for example.
Mhm.
How do you go from telling a story about that, and why is it hard to translate that story into a North American version? Why is it so hard to actually do an overseas movie, and then when we try to convert it over to the US, how is that hard for us?
I think, for once, you don't have to do this at all. You can just show the original movie, but then there's a tendency to dislike, you know, either dub movies or movies with subtitles. But that's what now it's a bit about to change, with movies like Parasite, South Korean movie. Um, being accepted in the States, I think there'll be less of an obstacle. But obviously, there's more money to be had if you have a new movie of the same script. Because in most cases, you don't need to do that, and I don't know what. Well, I do know why they do that, because. Well, then they say, well, who's going to see that as a Norwegian actor, or this is doesn't relate to an American audience. I think the most important factor is the star factor. If you need American stars, like this movie with Will Ferrell, which is made. That's a remake of a Norwegian movie. It's coming out now. I don't see anything in the story of the movie that would not translate of the original movie to American audiences. Have you heard of that? It's a guy, he's with his family in a skiing vacation, and then there's
Yeah, it's called Downhill.
yeah. Has it been released yet? I don't know. I like
Yeah,
Will Ferrell, but
it was released, but it didn't do so well at the box office. It's also a
oh,
remake as well. It was also a
yeah,
remake at one time.
it's a remake of that Norwegian movie, and that's why I'm seeing it as an example for a movie. Because you were asking me why do they have to remake them, or why do you have to tell them at all or make a new movie? I don't think you do, because if you live in a big metropolitan region, it's not so important if you live in Oslo or New York or Los Angeles or London. You can relate to those stories, and people in the States have related to stories from British cinema for a long time. So I think they could relate to French and German and Italian movies. Actually, if you look at the important American directors like Martin Scorsese or Oliver Stone, they always had a penchant for those European movies of the 50s, 60s, and 70s that were hugely influenced by them. And so I think it can broaden, it can definitely be interesting for a wider audience, but you have to have a movie, a company that's behind it, a big distributor who's sometimes it works. It worked for a while with British comedies such as For Weddings and a Funeral, and
Yeah.
some European movies like that, international movies have been successful in the States. But obviously, it's more interesting for American producers to produce an American movies than movie than to do distribute a European one.
Right. And I believe too, sometimes it's actually hard to translate from, overseas movies to United States. Sometimes it might not translate over as well because we try to convert everything into and Americanize everything to the point where it's like we want to tell our own story and forget about what happened in the overseas thing. So we're just going to make our own story. So,
Yeah, it's interesting sometimes if you compare the movies, and obviously you have about a handful of cultural references that you have to redo. If you have a Norwegian movie and they're referring to some local Norwegian pop star, then you have to change that into an American pop star.
right.
And if it's a TV series that's big in Europe, then you have to change that to an American TV series. But actually, I think it's a bit of a boring job for a screenwriter. I wouldn't like to do that. Just change those little cultural references and tell the same story over.
Right.
And I don't think it was very often rewarded, and I don't think the results are often very good and not even very successful. If you look at three Men and a Baby and all those
Right.
movies were more charming in the original version than in the American version. Not because Americans don't make great movies; they do make great movies, but they make great original movies, and not
Right.
so much like remakes, right?
Right. And another thing too is I have to say the closest thing to that was perfect to a remake as far as an overseas thing is Infernal Affairs, which is also called The Departed. They came out with Jack Nicholson, Leonardo DiCaprio.
I
That is
haven't even
probably the closest to a perfect one.
Yeah. Did you see the? Was it Japanese or Hong? I'm not sure. Where was it
It was
from?
Japanese. I want to say it was a Japanese movie of Infernal Affairs. Get this. I love foreign films though too, so I don't
Mhm.
mind reading subtitles or anything like that. It doesn't bother me to read subtitles. So I watch just about anything I can actually gravitate towards. So if it has a good plot, I'm gonna watch it. Infernal Affairs is a great movie and
So what
everything.
we if you compare those two versions? Because I just saw the Departed, and that was great. And what are the pros and cons of each version for you?
For me, it's a tie. I mean, to me,
Hmm.
it's different in a sense, but it's also kind of the same. But they made it their own movie, and it actually works out great on both ends because of the fact it's not a paint by the numbers kind of remake. It's a movie that's based off the Irish mob versus
Oh.
something that's in Hong Kong or whatever. So it's
Mhm.
totally different, and it's something relatable. It's also been shot in my hometown of Boston as well.
Oh.
So it holds up to something that actually means something to me. Matter of fact, I actually did a review on The Departed on my audio only podcast, and I love The Departed. I love Infernal Affairs, but
Mhm.
it was like, well, how does the original compare to the remake? I said, to be honest with you, they run a tight race. There is no in between with these two films for me.
Okay, great. Yeah, I love
So
those. Some great acting, and sometimes if you have those movies where you have great actors and you know people who are not famous for being character actors, but movie stars like Matt Damon and Alec Baldwin. What sometimes happens is that the fame takes away from the
mhm.
story because you always see them like that, and they avoided that really nicely in The Departed, because you had Jack Nichols and you had Alec Baldwin,
Yeah.
as I said, and other famous people, but they were just actors and they emerged in that story and they set the story and they were not vain in that. They were not just showy for that. And so I like that. That was the thing I
Me too.
remember most of that. It was a great story and no
Mhm.
stars took away from that by, putting themselves too much in the front line.
Right, because it could easily say, "Hey, look at me, I'm Alec Baldwin. Look at me, I'm Leonardo DiCaprio, and I'm going to control this whole entire movie." But no,
Yeah.
everybody knew what their characters were. They knew step by step on what to do. No one felt like they were bigger than everybody else. They did their
Mhm.
job. They did what they had to do. Everybody says yes to a Martin Scorsese film. If you don't, something's wrong with you. But you know,
Yeah.
but you know, that's what I loved about it was the fact that everybody was working together as a team versus saying, I am this. Like uh they're the almighty gods of Zeus or something and saying, look at
Mhm.
me, I'm better than you and stuff like that. And I didn't get that from The Departed at all. I felt like everybody was
No,
very well connected.
definitely. I agree.
Let's see. And then, like we pointed out with the superhero films and everything, I love superhero films, but I also like to actually separate myself from the superhero films and go to other films though too.
Hmm.
Because I love creativity away from the superhero films. I'm not saying that you can't be creative with superhero films or anything like that. Because look at Ant-Man. Ant-Man was a heist movie turned into a superhero movie, which is something that I love because it was something new and fresh. And then
Right.
you have other stuff that I really love, like Honey Boy, which is a Shia LaBeouf film. Then you also have the Peanut Butter Falcon with Shia LaBeouf, which is also a smaller film. Those movies were just fantastic and everything, and people
Right.
will miss out on them because of those big budget films. But I'm just thankful enough that I can actually turn on Amazon and look at an indie film and just fall in love with it because
Hmm.
that's the beauty of it.
Right. Right. And there's just one thing I wanted to add about independent movie making, which is kind of interesting because it leads back to the best directors of professional movies, because theoretically what you can do when you have a big budget is you can shoot as much as you like, and the material is not expensive these days anymore because it's all digital and there's no problem. But people like Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese, what they do is they edit in the camera. They just shoot the scenes that they know that they need. They just shoot the angles. Sorry, not the scenes, the angles that they know that they need. So what you used to do in a big Hollywood movies is that you say, okay, we have the scene of two people talking, and then we have coverage from this side, and we have coverage from that side. And so they don't do that anymore. They say, no, why would I, use that? Why would I film that moment of the conversation from two sides if I know that I want to have this just from one angle? So they basically decide before very well what they want to do. And that is ironically how you have to shoot an independent movie, because you don't have the time. You don't have the time for coverage. And that's also something that was interesting that I had to do. And then obviously you have to find a style in that. Sometimes you don't even have the coverage, the time, if you have long scenes, to put 2, 3, 4 different angles, but you just have to see, okay, this is a 30-second scene, and we're going to make it interesting by having this from one angle, because we don't have the time to set up another angle because we have 24 days of shooting. And so we better find a way of making the best out of that. And a lot of actors who shoot both independent movies and big budget movies say, it's often the most creative and the most original that you come up with when you have to think of something because of budget reasons. That's when you really have the greatest ideas sometimes. A lot of actors then actually, for that reason, also love being on independent movies. So that's what occurred to me also when I made my movie. That's an interesting point, I think.
Okay. Well, I believe this though too. Yeah, you only have this many minutes to actually do a certain angle, but sometimes it can actually pay off in the end, because for me, I pay attention to camera angles because they can either glue you into a movie or they can actually take you out of the movie depending on how the angle's actually set up. For example, I'm going to use 2 examples. One is going to be a TV show. The other one's going to be a movie. The movie Don't Breathe is a perfect example of a smaller film, an independent film that was successful, which was like a $6 million budget, I believe, or $7 million budget. And the way it was set up, you see the thieves going into the room, and then all of a sudden you see the other thief and everything near the wall, near the corner, and then at the other corner you actually have the victim who's actually being burglarized coming through, and he's blind. He's supposed to be a blind guy trying to trap these kids into the house.
Sure, I saw that.
So right. So when I see that camera angle and everything, my mind just literally just blew, because of the fact that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of tension being built up, and you don't know how many minutes that they spent setting up that one angle, and it paid off depending on how long that whole entire angle is. Another example that I have to say is Dexter from season 1. I mentioned this on the show on the YouTube channel and also on the audio only that I converted. Was this. Okay, Dexter thinks that he can actually pick the lock to this ice truck killer. So he can't pick the lock. So he goes outside digging inside the trash. Well, here's the thing. You don't see what's on the inside of that room. It goes in from underneath the door. And then it shows the body part in that freezer. And then from the freezer, it shoots all the way to the outside to where Dexter's actually inside the trash dumpster trying to figure out if this is the ice truck killer or not the ice truck killer. So it's like the outside looking in kind of feel to it that I really liked about that.
Yeah. Sure, I can see that. Yeah,
so
you got it.
Right. So, as a matter of fact, I'm actually getting goosebumps just talking about that scene. But it's just like I said, certain scenes can actually glue you in, or they can take you out of a scene. Just like how a certain piece of music can either amplify it or take you out of a scene. For example, Atomic Blonde is also another one that I didn't really care for because of the fact that it felt like a 2.5-hour music video from the 80s. I was like, okay. At first, I'm energized, right? Because I'm like, okay, this woman's a total badass. She just took down this guy with this 80s music. I'm like, yes, okay, this is the intro. Then all of a sudden, 20 minutes later, it's music video, her taking down somebody. Music video, her taking down somebody. I'm like, okay, I'm done. It pulled me out. I ejected the disc. I've returned it back to Redbox because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. You know, but like I said, it goes to show you what can be good and what can be bad, what can take you out of certain movies.
Of course, definitely. And then
But
it's sometimes you don't even have the you don't even get the impression that that's been taken into consideration. That sometimes you think they're just aiming at the lowest common denomination. They just want to make it really obvious and for everybody to understand. But they don't always take into consideration people like you who've seen a movie or two and who concentrate on those points and camera angles and stuff like that.
right, and I feel like sometimes if they do that, they're actually trying to hide something, like within the marketing itself. Like for instance, Jupiter Ascending. We're trying to cover that movie up with big special effects and everything.
Yeah.
It's like look how glamorous this is. But what about the dialogue? What about the plot? You have a great, beautiful movie, but with shitty dialogue.
Yeah.
You're trying to cover something up.
Yeah.
But still, that's just my perspective. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. Right. What was that? There was somebody popping up, but that was just somebody saying hi. That was not a question.
yeah,
That was,
yeah, my friend Shirley.
hey, Shirley's got a dog. I thought
Yeah.
Shirley might want to ask a question.
Okay. Well, let's do that real quick. Okay, guys, look, we have a few minutes left of this whole entire conversation. I hope that you guys are actually enjoying the conversation that Brock and I are having. Look, do us a favor. Go on ahead, write in the comments section if you have any questions for him or for me and stuff like that. Go on ahead. We'll take at least 5 minutes out of this episode to be able to talk about this. This is why I love the live chats. This is why I do live, because I can actually answer you guys' questions. You can interrupt the show and things like that. So go on ahead, feel free, interrupt us as we're talking and everything. We don't mind. Go on ahead, talk to us.
Yeah.
So, this is what I love about the live chat, because it's actually a community that we can actually talk to each other. And that's actually one of the best things about the StreamYards and stuff like that, that I can actually pull up people's live chats and everything.
Sure.
But it doesn't look like anybody is very talkative tonight, which is okay. So
That's it. We got other things to talk about.
Right. So
what I was gonna say, because I was when you mentioned that and how you watch movies, and then I thought of that ideal for watching movies, which would be for actually also creating movies, which would be that old Shakespeare ideal that you have something that works on many different levels. You maybe have something for somebody who's interested in kings and queens, and so you have the story of that on the forefront. Then you have that story of psychology of human emotions, and then every once in a while he's got a joke scene in between. But if you have a good Shakespeare play and you produce it in the right way, you can have people of all kinds of backgrounds, of all kinds of intelligent levels, and they all have fun with it. And so I think sometimes it's sad that the studios just aim at what I referred to before as the lowest common denominator. We got to make sure that they understand that. And sometimes I literally see movies and there's a nice little remark and that builds on that kind of asks you to be smart and make a connection. And very often the next sentence they say something on the nose, they explain it again, and then they destroy that, because I think it was fun before. It was a nice little thing that they said, and they were taking me seriously as an intelligent viewer, and now they're not. They're destroying that. They want to make sure that everybody understands, and I don't think everybody doesn't have to understand not everything. So I try to do that in my movie too. I try to work in different things. Actually, some things I work in just for myself. The parts of the story that you don't need to understand, and just little parts, and that you can't. That's close to impossible to understand. I asked a lot of people if they got that. Nobody's got some things that I thought of, but it doesn't matter because it's just things you put in for some people to see, then things you put in for other people to see. You just try to be creative. And it's equally stupid to say everybody is stupid, so let's make a movie that appeals to everyone, and put that auteur kind of thing. Oh, I'm something special, and if nobody but me understands my movie, that's perfect. That's also stupid. You got to make an effort to reach different people with different backgrounds, and
Right.
and so that's what I was trying to do with my movie.
You see, I can definitely tell that's what you were trying to do, and I have to agree with you. The one of the little nitpicky things I have is don't treat us like idiots. Don't treat the average going movie audience like idiots. Don't try to
Yeah.
explain things to us and
Mhm.
everything. And to me, you don't have to explain everything. I mean, you know, and I was like, and nowadays everybody wants something explained to them. I'm like, what about speculation? What about using your imagination? What about being able to speculate with
Yeah.
among other moviegoers about how you think that this movie ended on your own merit and everything, rather than listen to the director who actually made the movie and knows why he ended it that way. He doesn't have to go in and explain why. Just use your imagination and use it for what it was intended for, because that's the beauty of actually making film, is for us to speculate, to be able to actually make us feel smarter when we're viewing a movie,
Yeah.
because we can actually speculate.
You have to engage people. Some people, would just see it and eat popcorn and drink Coke and just want to be played at. But most people want to be engaged. And then, as a filmmaker and as a producer, you want to connect to those little neurons in their head. Because if you make them think, that movie will stay so much longer and so much more connected in their heads and in their hearts, as opposed to just showing everything that putting everything lined out there, which is so boring. But I think it's sad, but we don't get to see many movies like that who appeal to the
Right.
intelligent audience.
Right, exactly. Like I said, we live in a different age where everything has to be explained versus something that we can just use our imaginations on. It's just the different generation that we have now with those movie
Yeah. Do you think it's going to
unfortunately.
go on like that, or do you think they'll? Well, on the other hand, if you have so many niche audiences and you have so many chances for little movies, so there might be, next to the one development going into bigger action movies and animated movies, there might be another movement with intelligent movies that don't tell you everything. Do you see
Right.
the? Aren't you optimistic about that? That there's a chance for that with all the
I think so.
streaming?
I think so, because with it being the streaming services and stuff like that, it allows the audience to actually connect with it a lot more. And it's only like, I feel like it's like a one-on-one rather than viewing it with a whole crowd, because you're viewing it for yourself in your own individual place at your home. So
Yeah.
therefore, it's just a one-on-one thing. You're just watching it for your own viewership versus sitting in there with several people. So therefore, you have that one experience with yourself versus with other people. So therefore, you can actually probably speculate a lot more on your own self rather than anything else. That's the way I.
Right. And
But
people do still enjoy movies as an experience that they have together. They don't necessarily see movies in the same theater or in the same room, with the lockdowns in every different countries. That's particularly difficult. But what you can do now, you can still share movies. You can still talk about movies. And you can use some modern means of even watching
right,
movies together. And I think it'll always be a shared experience, and people will always be not solitary about movies, but they'll always want to talk about them. What did it make you feel like? What did you take away from that? And so I think that will happen regardless of movies being in theaters out there or just on streaming services. People will
I
always
can agree.
interact.
Right, I can definitely agree with that. And I just want to point, okay, so we're actually running into our hour and everything. So this is actually where we're going to have to end it, unfortunately. But I want to actually have you back on again. I always enjoy our conversations, man. It's always been great to actually have you on
Me
here. I
too.
promise you, it's not going to be longer than a month this time. I actually want to have you back, man, because we get
I
really
love
deep
it.
into stuff, you know? So where can
Thank
everybody
you.
reach you at? You're welcome anytime. Thank you for wanting to come on. It's always it's just fantastic.
Wonderful, wonderful. And then just, if people want to tune in and see our Instagram, we are at the Midas Touch 2020. That's our Instagram. And then we have the Midas Touch online. You can see our movie preview. We have a little, two different trailers. And yeah, I love to be on your show, and it's always nice to hear your thoughtful comments on movies. And I love what
Thank you.
you do for movies. And sure, next time we're on and we're talking about something different, but there's so much left to talk about. So thanks for having me. Thank you
You're
so
very
much.
welcome, man. Anytime. You're very welcome. So, guys, here's the thing, guys. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be doing a movie review with someone tomorrow. Matter of fact, I think Thursday. Okay, Thursday, I actually have Rossi McCree on with me, an independent actress. We're going to be reviewing A Christmas Story. Wednesday, I'm actually going to be on somebody else's podcast reviewing A Christmas Story. So I'm reviewing The Christmas Story twice. And then, let's see here. I'm actually doing two shows on Thursday. So that's going to be fun. And then
Lot.
Friday, thanks. I actually have Tamika with me again on Friday night. We're reviewing National Lampoon's Vacation with independent writer
I love that
Quentin
movie.
Bennett. I love it too. Haven't seen it in years. I mean, man, I kept on busting out laughing all the way through the whole entire movie. Like I haven't even seen it in years. So I'm just, it's such a good movie. And then, guys, we are actually doing a Christmas Carol Muppet review on Saturday, and then Sunday we have another little review going on. And then to wrap everything up with a nice little bow, on Monday, Tuesday, I actually have Nicole, who is actually a independent actress, and we're going to be reviewing Jingle All the Way, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film that came out back in the 90s. So I have a lot going on, so it's just good to actually stay busy. So this is what I want you guys to do. I'm actually sponsored by Audible, and you can actually find the link to Audible below. You can actually get a 30-day trial with Audible if you guys want to, or you can guys get, that's actually one way to support the show. Another way that you can actually support the show is go to the GoFundMe link below. If you want to donate a couple of dollars or whatever towards the show, it actually helps with better equipment, better stuff to actually serve you guys with. Plus, I want to do giveaways, so what better way to actually give back to my fans and everything to do giveaways for you. And then another thing too that we have going on, if you want to get news to all the entertainment news and everything, go to www.movieloversunite.com. You can find this on all podcast platforms for the audio only version. And then, of course, you can also find us here on YouTube. And we also have a Pinterest called Movie Lovers TV Lovers Unite. We also have a Twitter page called Movie Lovers Unit on Twitter. Or you can follow me at John DeGorio 8. Always, until next time, guys, it's been great. It's been fun. Stay safe. Disinfect your hands. Put on your mask. And bye-bye.